The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
There's a million different ways to win basketball games. But, I know one thing, if you don't have the buy-in, if you don't have strong relationships with your players, I don't care what you do, you're not winning consistently.
Luke Stuckey is the boys basketball head coach at Yuma Catholic High School in Yuma, Arizona. Stuckey has experience at all levels of the game, from high school to the NBA. Collegiately, he served as the head men's basketball coach at NJCAA D2 Lincoln Trail College in Robinson, Illinois, from 2016 to 2021. Prior to that, he was an assistant for one season at NCAA D2 Cameron University in Lawton, Oklahoma. Stuckey began his career at Jolla High School in California as a JV coach and varsity assistant from 2004 to 2008. He served as the head coach at San Dieguito Academy from 2004 to 2008, where his school hosted summer pickup games for NBA players including Kawhi Leonard and Klay Thompson. Luke developed a relationship with then Spurs shooting coach Chip Engelland, who eventually recommended him to Orlando Magic head coach Jacque Vaughn. Stuckey was hired by Vaughn in 2012 and worked primarily in player development with the Magic until 2014, when he decided to leave the NBA to pursue a college coaching position.
Hey Hoopheads, check out the Triple Threat Sales event this September from our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. They're offering $3,000 off their All-Star Plus machine, $1,000 off their Dr. Dish Home machine, and $100 off their IC3. Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. Those are some great deals, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
This is Billy Hansen, author of Harder Than I Thought, Easier Than I Feared, and you're listening to the Hoopheads Podcast.
If you're looking to improve your coaching, please consider joining the Hoopheads Mentorship Program. We believe that having a mentor is the best way to maximize your potential and become a transformational coach. By matching you up with one of our experienced mentors, you'll develop a one-on-one relationship that will help your coaching, your team, your program, and your mindset. The Hoopheads Mentorship Program delivers mentoring services to basketball coaches at all levels through our team of experienced head coaches. Find out more at hoopheadspod.com or shoot me an email directly, mike@hoopheadspod.com. Follow us on social media at hoopheadspod on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to check out the Hoopheads Podcast Network for more great basketball content. Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering Hoopheads listeners 15% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code HHP15 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its play bank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball. Jot down some notes as you listen to this episode with Luke Stuckey, boys basketball head coach at Yuma Catholic High School in the state of Arizona. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, and we are pleased to be joined by Luke Stuckey, the head boys basketball coach at Yuma Catholic High School in Yuma, Arizona. Excited to have you on. Looking forward to diving into all the things that you've been able to do in your coaching career. You've got a wide variety of experiences at lots of different levels in the game. So I think for our coaches that are out there, you're going to really enjoy hearing Luke's story and just the different things that he's been able to do throughout his career. Want to go back in time, Luke, to when you were a kid. Tell us a little bit about some of your first experiences that you remember with the game of basketball. What made you fall in love with it?
The fall in love with part of it was really for two reasons. The first being Michael Jordan, and the second, my pops. I grew up just south of Chicago, right during, the Jordan years, and being a young kid, right place, right time, man. I just loved everything about the Bulls, Michael Jordan. It was just something to watch when you're that age. I just idolized, Mike and everything about him, the way he carried himself, his swagger, how he played the game, and many, many, many nights in the backyard trying to be Michael Jordan, posted up my little brother. So, he was one of the big reasons why I fell in love with the game. And then the second reason, like I mentioned before, my dad, he was a brief college basketball player, allegedly a good high school player, although I've never seen the game film. The only thing I've seen is some newspaper clippings, but, his claim to fame is I guess he scored 18 points on Jacque Sigma. But if you read further down the column, I think Jacque had like 34 and his team won by 20 or 30. So
did your
dad was a big influence.
Did he have as good a hair? Did he have as good a hair as Jacque Sigma?
Not, and nowhere near the post game either. So, so he was a big influence. He loved the game. He coached a little bit. And, he took me to just a lot of different games. Every year it was kind of a tradition with me and him. We would go to the Illinois high school basketball tournament. And, those are some of my greatest memories as a little kid, going and watching these great high school players in the state of Illinois. Kevin Garnett, Ronnie Fields, those guys are just like heroes to me. And, it was a little tradition we had. So being around the game all the time, and then just growing up, during those Jordan years, it was easy to fall in love with the game.
All right, let's talk a little Michael Jordan. I can't let that pass because anybody who listens to this podcast knows that I am probably one of the biggest Michael Jordan fans, supporters, advocates of him being the greatest of all time. And to me, it's not even a discussion. So give me your case for Michael Jordan, greatest of all time, your experiences with being a fan of Jordan. Just what makes you believe that he's the greatest player of all time? Just give me your memories, things that stand out to you as a basketball coach.
It was never a question of, if the Bulls were going to win or if Michael Jordan was going to come up with a clutch play. At the end, it was like, well, how is he going to? You just knew it was going to happen. And, man, he didn't let you down often. He came through just so many times. And that was just amazing to watch him do that, And, as a kid, your memory's probably a little skewed, but you were shocked almost when something happened. I remember when they lost to Orlando, when he made his comeback, and you were just shocked that he didn't come through for you. And so, just time and time again, how he came through in the clutch with big shots, even though everybody knew, or big plays, he was going to have the ball. He still just came through. And as a kid, that was just so fun to watch.
I think the thing for me, the word that I always use, and I think it goes to exactly what you just talked about, was when you watched Michael Jordan play, you just felt like he was inevitable. And whether that was him individually coming through with a big shot or a big play or whatever needed to be done in order to win a game, you just knew that was going to happen. And then conversely, with his team, same way. You always felt like somehow, some way, Jordan was going to get it done and the Bulls were going to win games. And I've never watched any other athlete in any other sport where I could sit and feel as confident that no matter what the game looked like or what the situation was, that somehow, some way, he was going to get it done and he was going to win. And I just think there's never been another athlete, and there's never been certainly another basketball player that combines the athleticism and then just the incredible will to win and thrive under pressure that Michael Jordan has. And as great as guys in the game today are, and obviously there's a lot of people that feel like LeBron is encroaching on Michael Jordan's territory as the greatest of all time, I think if you live through both eras, and as you said, maybe we're skewed and maybe you look back and the guy that you followed as a kid, you're probably partial to that person, but we live here in Cleveland. And so we rooted for LeBron as a fan of the Cavaliers and as a huge fan of LeBron James as well. But to me, I just don't think that there's anybody that's approached that level of skill and the mental side of the game better than Michael Jordan. It's hard to imagine anybody ever will, Luke. I find it hard to believe.
Watching that series that came out about the Bulls and Michael Jordan there during the pandemic, it just confirmed everything that, I already kind of knew going into it. But yeah, there's been a lot of good players come along before, after Mike. But yeah, you never had that feeling like when he was watching that. I like the word you use. It was inevitable. Even watching LeBron, he's great, but you don't have that same feeling that it's inevitable. And that's why I love the guy.
Yeah, I could have watched 50 hours of that documentary. They could have just thrown it all together. Whatever was left on the cutting room floor, I could have watched hours and hours and hours of that thing. It was incredible. So going back to your experiences, obviously Jordan has a big influence. Your dad has a big influence on you, and just the opportunity to go and watch games with him and him putting that love for the game, instilling that in you. When did coaching get on your radar? Was that something that you started to think about as a kid while you were still playing, or was that something that didn't come to you until after you were done with your playing career?
Slowly developed. I think I always kind of analyzed the game a little bit growing up as a kid, watching. But I think one of the best things that ever happened to me is, an injury, honestly, where, during my high school, my college career, I just had kind of a chronic knee injury. And, it kind of slowed my career down to the point where it's like, well, man, I'm probably not going to be able to stay in the game as a player. I'm probably nowhere near good enough to earn a living as a player, but I got to stay in this somehow. I love it too much. And so, the next best thing is coaching. And so, during my college years is when I really started to think about it and really get into it and know that, this was going to be a path forward for me and a great way to just stay involved with the game.
Did you initially think when you were started to think about coaching, were you thinking about it from a high school coaching perspective? Were you thinking, hey, maybe eventually I'd like to coach in college? Just where was your mindset? Or was it more, I really don't care what the level is, I just want to get into coaching? Where were you with it when you first started?
I played junior college basketball, and I thought my college coach, he had a great gig. He kind of taught a few classes and coached some pretty talented guys. And at first I thought, man, that wouldn't be a bad way to make a living. Coaching, recruiting your own team. And as I got a little older, the high school level was very appealing. That's where I got my start, was at the high school level. But yeah, I guess I really never honed in on one specific level, and definitely the NBA was never on my radar. Yeah, I think to start, I would have loved to just been a small college coach. But my path's kind of taken me all over, and I've been really fortunate.
So was your first experience as a coach when you coached at La Jolla High School as an assistant coach, or did you have some experiences before that, maybe on lower levels before you got into the high school level?
My first true coaching experience, I would say, took me 5 years to graduate college, and that fifth year, I put together a little travel team, and that was, kind of my start of coaching, and did it in my hometown. Got some kids together and played in some tournaments, which was a lot of fun. And, that's kind of where I got my feet wet, got my start in coaching. But my first true coaching experience was at La Jolla High. And, I was so lucky to have that opportunity. My brother was living out in San Diego. He's a Navy SEAL out there, still is out there. And, he just kept telling me what a great place San Diego was, and you got to come out here and see it. So the first thing I did when I graduated was got my car, packed my stuff, and moved out to San Diego. And just by pure coincidence, happened to meet one of my coaching mentors, a guy by the name of Kamal Asaf. He was just a great mentor for me. He was the head coach at La Jolla High. It was his first head coaching experience. He brought me in as a freshman coach my first year, and he was just such a great teacher of the game. I learned so much from him, and that's where I really got my start.
What did you like about coaching right from the start? If you can remember back to that first year, what's something you're like, oh man, I love this aspect of coaching?
Especially with young kids that are just learning the game. You're teaching new things to them, and it's real raw, and they really don't know what they're doing yet. And there's a lot of work to be put in. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of practice hours, a lot of reps to get anywhere near where you want your team to be, especially when you're coaching at that freshman level. But just the process and seeing the kids buy in to your program and what you're teaching them. It's just so rewarding to see that and to have that take place, right in front of you like that. So I really enjoyed that process and the teaching aspect of it, kind of sharing what I had learned along the way, and just teaching these young kids, how to become, basketball players and young men.
Early in your career, where did you go for education in terms of becoming a better coach? Were you talking to your coaching mentors? Were you talking to your head coach, as you mentioned? Are you reading? Are you watching film? Where are you going to improve your craft as a coach early on in your career?
I think the biggest influence when I was a young coach was again the head coach at La Jolla High, Kamala Saf. I spent a lot of hours, pretty much every single practice with the varsity squad, sometimes playing against them, a lot of open gyms, but he was just such a good teacher, and, you could bounce any idea off of him, and, he was open to listen, but, he was just a great teacher of the game. He had some great coaching mentors as well that I had access to through him. And, I was just able to soak up a lot, in my early 20s, and just really learn how to run a program, how to treat people, how to coach kids. He just had a way about getting kids' attention and teaching. And so I really learned a lot during those first few years of how to run a program. And, I think that's so important, when you're getting your start, to be with someone that's good. It can go either way. And, I know you can learn from some mistakes, but it's a lot easier to learn from a guy who's, really teaching the game at a high level and having some success. So, I got to see that program kind of get built from the ground up. We weren't very good our first couple years, and in the last few years, we won CIF championships. And so that was just great to be a part of and see that process unfold.
What's something that, when you think back to that time, that you've taken with you that's still part of your coaching today?
I was just amazed at, the patience Coach Asaf would have at certain times, a lot of mistakes being made, the process to develop a program and get to a high level, it's slow. And, he probably had a lot more patience than I did with it. And so watching him be patient and just kind of watching things take place and, how he handled that, that's something I've always taken with me to, don't cheat it, don't rush. There's a order, kind of how things have to happen. And he was just so good at that. And that's something I've always taken with me to, believe in your system, teach your system, be patient with kids, let them make mistakes, and, just treat them good. I've never understood the yelling, screaming, that whole technique. I know it works sometimes, but, the young kids, they're not trying to make these mistakes. And they have to be patient with them and just keep teaching them, keep coaching them.
I think that's a great point. It's certainly a way that the coaching profession has changed. You think back to what the model was of a great coach in, let's say, the 70s and 80s. You had this model of sort of the Bobby Knight school of you got to be hard-nosed and you got to yell and it's kind of my way or the highway. And clearly the coaching profession has evolved for the better. And you think about how much more you can get out of your athletes when you are motivating them with love as opposed to fear. And it's been, I think, one of the things that's been such a positive for the coaching profession is that evolution where coaches and people realize that you don't have to beat your athletes down in order to be able to get the most of them and get the most out of them. And I think that's exactly, what you were able to see earlier in your career. And then obviously that has a big influence on the way you coach moving forward. After La Jolla, you get an opportunity to take over and become a head coach. Talk a little bit about how that experience, how that opportunity came to you, and then how prepared or unprepared you were when you first sat down in that head coach's chair.
My first head coaching experience, I think I was about 27 years old at the time. And, going into that, I thought I knew it all, as we all do at some point when we were young coaches. I took over a program that was, I guess the best way to say it had a glorified intramural program before that, not very competitive. The school, it wasn't a big focus. Athletics weren't, that important on campus. And I knew that going into taking the job, but a new athletic director had just came in. He came from a school that had a lot of success. And so I felt like, hey, it's a school with, not a lot of tradition, not a lot of history with basketball. I liked that challenge of kind of starting something new, something fresh. And I did think there was a lot of potential. The name of the school is San Dieguito Academy. And so, I thought it was a great opportunity for me. Had no clue what I was doing that first year. Just kind of, went by what I had learned before, from my coaching mentors, and tried to instill that and build a program from the ground up. Those first few years was when the patience really was tested. I think we had all of 5 wins maybe my first year, and I believe 3 of them were against the same team. So good scheduling, but it was definitely challenging. And you start to question the things that you really believed in before. It's like, man, we were winning CIF championships before, and running a similar style, a similar program, and now we can't win a game. So the patience was definitely tested, not only with the losing, but also just challenging your beliefs as a coach. What you believe in, the values you want to instill in your program. It's hard to see that end game when you're losing. But we were fortunate. And, one of the things I'm most proud of as a coach is what we built at San Dieguito over those 4 years. So, it was tough. And, I think one of the key things for me was, just keeping an open mind and just knowing as a young coach, I don't know everything. I think that's a big mistake a lot of young coaches make is, you want to be confident in yourself. You want to, command the gym and those are all great things. But at the same time, and you have to know, we all have a lot to learn. You can learn anything from anybody. You can learn from a 5th grade soccer coach, just, anything. So, taking that approach, I think was key for me, kind of maturing as a coach and just constantly trying to soak up new ideas and find any way to improve our program.
At what point during your tenure there do you feel like you had things turned around, if that makes any sense? Was there an aha moment where something happened, you're like, oh, we get it now, or, oh, I think we got this thing going in the right direction? Or was it more of a gradual type of process? Obviously it was gradual, but was there a moment where you're sitting on the bench and all of a sudden something happened, you're like, wow, we get it?
The thing that popped in my head when you're asking that question was, I believe it was the start of the first game of my 3rd year. We had a good, solid group of young players. Several of them went on to play college. One of them still playing professionally right now in Europe, but had a great group of, I think it was sophomores and juniors that year. And our first game was against La Jolla High, my old mentor, Coach Asaf. And, he'd still had a strong program. They were still winning games. And, we went into their gym first game of the year and just put it on them. And that was such a great feeling to, go in there and kind of, beat a program that was well respected. And, at that moment, I kind of felt like, all right, the tide is turning. We can go out and compete now. And, our program is definitely moving in the right direction. So that was confirmation for me. It was that first game of my third year.
Yeah, it's fun to see things actually get to what you envision when you first take the job. And obviously, as you said, it takes a while. And I think that's one of the challenges that coaches face, right? When you take over a program that's losing, to me, one of the biggest challenges is how do you continue to sell your program, your philosophy, the things that you're doing when the wins aren't coming. So when you remember back to those early years where maybe you didn't win as much as you wanted to, how did you keep the faith of the players, the families, the AD, the school community? What are some things that you tried to do to continue to help them to maintain faith in you and your program? Because I know it's easy to do when you're winning. It's harder to do when you're losing. So how do you go about doing that, getting people to still believe, even though maybe the results on the scoreboard aren't showing that you're moving in the right direction, but internally that you are because of the things that you're seeing every day in your program and in your practices?
There's a couple things. I think number one is just being honest with your long-term vision for your program and for each individual kid, So, there's an individual aspect of it where, the kids want to see improvement individually too. And, you got to put that sweat equity into get in the gym, work with kids individually, put that individual skill work in. And, from a team perspective, we might not have won a lot of games, but the improvement was obvious where, we were competing against bigger schools that, we would have never even been able to compete with in previous years. So, we were shortening that gap, no doubt. I think the kids, the parents all saw that. They saw what was on the horizon with our youth. We were a young team. And because, we put that time in just to, development wise. And, I think when kids know, hey, I'm getting better, our team's getting better, it was an easy sell. I don't want to say easy, but we could definitely see it. It was obvious that, it was going the right way. And time was just crucial for that. We spent so much time in the gym together. We were fortunate to, it was a medium-sized school in California, but we didn't have a football program. And, we had a lot of our kids committed, all summer long to basketball. And so we were really able to make a lot of gains. And a lot of those kids just really developed most. And I think everybody saw that.
I think that when you can point to that internal improvement and you can see where your players are getting better and they feel it and they know the amount of time that you're putting in, I think that's when you really can start to find that success. When you think about what you did as a head coach in that first experience, what's something that when you look back on it, when you first started as a head coach to where you are now, and obviously we're going to get into some of the other experiences you had at the college level and the pro level, but just when you think about where you are as a head coach today versus where you were when you first took the job, can you point to one or two things? And I'm sure the answer is probably, everything, but if you can point to one or two things that you think you really improved upon over the course of your career, that, boy, I'm a much better head coach, or I'm a much better coach in this particular area compared to when I first started, what would those areas be?
Like you said, it's everything, but if I had to pinpoint a few things, just from an X's and O's standpoint, I think, the NBA just gave me a doctoral degree in the game of basketball. That was just such a great experience to learn from just outstanding coaches. And so, I know just looking back at some of the things we did back then and kind of my understanding of, different actions we ran, during those early high school coaching years, it's almost kind of funny. I thought I understood, but, I didn't yet. Not to say what we did was wrong, But I just think I have a much better understanding now of, how to design an offense, how to fit your offense to your talents. And the same thing defensively. I just think both sides of the ball, the attention to detail now has grown from where it was back then. And again, that's just from my NBA experiences and just learning from some of those coaches at that level. So yeah, the X's and O's would be the biggest part. And I think the second thing is just understanding too, as a coach, that, there's a million different ways to win basketball games. You can win games playing a 2-3 zone. You can win championships playing a 2-3 zone. You can win games and championships running a pack line. There's a lot of different ways to win. And, understanding that. And, I think when I was a young coach, I was almost a little arrogant about, our system. And, we had pride in what we did. And I think that was a good thing. But it was almost like, if anybody did anything different than what we did, to me, it was like, oh, that's wrong, And maturing as a coach is learning, man, there's a lot of ways that people can beat you. And, I've definitely came a long way with that. I think there's a few things in every program that are winning characteristics. But overall, we've all seen it, man. You can win games doing a lot of different things.
Yeah, experience is a great teacher. And I think this is something that I've said on the podcast numerous times, but I think back to myself as a young coach, and basically everything that I did or knew, I took from the coaches that I had played for. And I played for one high school coach and one college coach. And so when I first got the opportunity to be a head JV coach, and I kind of had semi-control over my little team, and we basically just did everything that I had done as a player. And being an egotistical young guy, just like you described earlier, like I thought I knew everything. And you look back on it now, you're like, man, I knew nothing. And I wish I would have taken, I wish I would have taken some more time to educate myself and really go out and take more advantage of learning the game. But I just, at that point, I think my ego was still in the way and just felt like, hey, I did all these things as a player, and that's good enough to make me a good coach. And the older you get, obviously, the more you realize that very, very little. And you also realize what a disservice you did to kids that you coached earlier in your career, where you just didn't put the time in. So you obviously had a really good experience there as a head coach for the first time at San Dieguito. So you get an opportunity. Anybody who's looking at your bio is going to go, now wait, hold on. This guy was an assistant coach at the high school level. Then he gets a head coaching job at the high school level. And then the next thing on his bio is he's working for the Orlando Magic. So how does that take place? Tell us the story of how you get connected to Orlando, and then we'll dive into what your experience was like in the NBA.
Yeah, it's a story of right place, right time, I guess you could say. And, a lot of coaching opportunities are just that, being in the right place at the right time. Because there were so many people that were just obviously more deserving probably of that job than I was. But, the NBA had just got done with that lockout season. And, back I was a little younger, I could still play a little bit. And so got to know a lot of NBA guys that spent their off seasons out in San Diego, Chase Budinger, Kawhi Leonard, and a few other guys. And so we had some great open gyms, open runs in our gym there at San Dieguito during some off seasons there. Where, man, I think back on it now and it was just amazing. We had Klay Thompson in there, Darren Williams, there'd be 6-7, bona fide NBA guys on the floor all at once. And so it was a lot of fun, but I got to know Kawhi Leonard a little bit. And he had asked me if I would host his youth basketball camp there in our gym at San Dieguito. And, that was a no-brainer. And we did that. And it was a 5-day camp, I believe. And during that time, one of the assistant coaches from the San Antonio Spurs, Chip Engelland, he was in town, and he was there at the camp the whole time. He would work with Kawhi before and after the camp. So, I got to watch that. But I got to develop a relationship with Coach Engelland, the assistant coach with the Spurs. We talked a lot. He kind of got to see during that week how I ran my program, ran the camp, and we just kind of developed a relationship. And, at the end of the camp, we talked about maybe an opportunity for an unpaid internship with their G League team. And, as a high school coach who would never dream of, coaching at that level, I was all in. I said, absolutely. I would love to do it. What do I have to do? I'll be there. Tell me when, tell me, what I have to do. And so a little bit of time passed, and, nothing more of that opportunity is really talked about. And so, I was a little bummed out, but, it's the way things go sometimes. And, there's probably a month or two that had passed since the last conversation. And I'll never forget, I was in the shower one evening in my little apartment in San Diego, and get out, and I have a weird phone number that had called me with a message. And I listened to the message, and it's Jacque Vaughn, head coach of the Orlando Magic. He'd just been named the head coach several weeks before. And, Jacque previously was an assistant coach with the San Antonio Spurs. And, for anybody who's been in the NBA circle, Coach Engelland, who I had got to know, was just so well respected. He's just such a great coach, just a kind man who's always looking to help people. He's generous, trying to give other young coaches opportunities. And so when Jacque got that job, he talked to Coach Engelland, and Coach Engelland said, hey, I met a young guy out in San Diego. You might want to talk to him about having him come onto your staff. So I listened to the message, immediately called Coach Vaughn back. My heart rate was probably double what it is right now. And, we had a full-on, I want to say, hour and a half, 2-hour phone conversation just about a lot of different things. And, the next thing I know, I think it was 24 hours later, I'm on a first-class flight to Orlando. And, never flown on a first-class flight in my life. It was just kind of all a whirlwind at that point. But, I got some feedback from some other guys who had coached at the NBA level. Eric Musselman was I knew him a little bit from his ties in San Diego. So I gave him a call and just got some good advice from him on, what prep work do I need to do going into this. And, my coaching mentor, Coach Asaf, had given me some good advice on, what to expect. And so flew to Orlando, and, got in, spent a whole day there in the practice facility. And, the big thing that was a bit of a curveball, but, I was definitely prepared for it, was I went in and I ran a full workout with a group of young guys. It was kind of a mix of, guys that were NBA vets kind of looking to get in and get back in. And then some young guys who, were just drafted. So it was a group of hungry guys, looking to find their way into the league. And I think that was great because, they didn't know who the heck I was. And, they went hard. The workouts went really well. The conversations with the general manager, Coach Vaughn, it just clicked. And so, flew back, waited, had a few more phone conversations. And, that was probably the longest 3 or 4 weeks of my life, just waiting, to hear one way or the other.
Right,
is this going to happen or is it going to be a heartbreaker? And, finally I got that call from Coach Vaughn, and he asked me if I was ready. And I couldn't believe it, just in shock to go from, coaching a bunch of, high school knuckleheads to, shortly after being on the floor with, JJ Redick and Jameer Nelson. And, it was just a crazy story. And again, just so lucky to have that opportunity that, like I said, a lot of coaches are probably more deserving.
Right place, right time, as you said. Did you have, I'm sure you had some self-doubt as you went into it? Because I think about an experience that if I was put in that position, or I think if anybody was put in that position, you'd probably think to yourself what you just said out loud, right? I was I'm just coaching some high school knuckleheads, and now here I am out there on the floor with the very best players in the world. When you went into that, how did you go about and think about preparing yourself to make sure that you were at your best so that you could provide what the Magic was looking for? What did you do in the intervening moments from when you thought it was a possibility you're going to get the job to as you're getting started? What did you do to make sure, hey, I have to be as prepared as possible? What were some of the things that you did?
Biggest thing that, alleviated some of that pressure was, Coach Vaughn was just so honest with me about, hey, I know what you don't know. And, he just gave me the confidence then to be like, okay, that's okay. I don't need to know everything yet. And, I just think he saw, potential in me to learn that, to learn the NBA game. And, I think he just liked the way I taught the game and approached the skill development part of it. And so he was so good with me, just giving me the confidence to, hey, you belong here. We know what you don't know, and you'll learn it along the way. So that was a big part of it. But asking a lot of questions, I think back to our staff, those first few years there, just a tremendous staff of coaches who went on to have great success. James Borrego, who did a great job at the Charlotte Hornets here the last few years. He was on our staff. Wes Unseld Jr., who's now the head coach in Washington. Just unbelievable coaches, and just so willing to share a game with me and teach me what they had learned, because they'd been around that NBA game for so long. And so just being able to sit with them hours on hours, a lot of flights, just sitting next to those guys, watching game film and learning from them. I would say, it was a process. The game, I can remember watching the first few practices and first few preseason games that first year, and it just moved so fast. And, that took a long time to get used to. But slowly the game slows down, just kind of like it does, as a player. It moves fast at first, especially when you bump up levels, but the more you see it, the more you play the game, it eventually slows down for you. And it did. And, a lot of that was just learning from those guys.
Describe your role. What was it that you did? What was the discussion like, the conversations when you were given your responsibilities?
Yeah, and that's something I'm just so grateful that, I was with Coach Vaughn. He threw me right into the fire. I remember our first practice and training camp. We're sitting in our coaches meeting, and he looks at me and says, Coach, you got our pin down defense today. Take the guys through it. And so, him having that confidence in me was just was big, but it was, I think a lot, they just kind of lined up, and, having the guys that just were very patient with me and were able to big.
When you think about the opportunity to work with NBA players and what makes them so special in terms of their ability to succeed at the highest levels, obviously there's a level of physical tools that a player needs to have to be able to play at that level, and there's a certain skill set, but there's things I think that go beyond that. So when you think about the opportunity to work with those guys that you had a chance to get out on the court and actually coach, what sets them apart from a player who doesn't make it in the NBA? Or I'm sure you work with players who tried to compete and couldn't stay at that level. So just what's from an intangible mental side of the game, what sets apart an NBA player from an average college player who maybe can't make it in the NBA?
Two things. And I think the biggest thing, and I would talk to my college guys about this all the time, I think the guys that make it in the league that aren't superstars, they understand the role. Not everybody has to go out and be a superstar, but you have to have a tool that gets you on a roster and is valuable to that team. And I think that's a lot of what young players at that level, they make the mistake of thinking, well, I have to go out here and do everything. I have to, be a great rebounder, a great three-point shooter. I have to do this, that. You don't. We have very specific roles we need filled. And, if you're just kind of average at everything, it's going to be tough to find your way onto an NBA roster. Whereas, man, if you can go shoot 40% from the three-point line, or, you can guard at an elite level, or you can rebound at an elite level, we don't need you to do everything. We need you to fill a role. And, so it's tough for a lot of young guys coming out of college where maybe they did do everything for their college team to make that transition to, okay, now I'm a role player here and I have to be great at this role. And the guys that stick, they get that early. They thrive at it. They accept it. They take pride in it. And, I think that's true at every level, whether it be a JV kid moving up to varsity basketball in high school, your role's not going to be the same, or a high school kid moving on to college. Very few guys' roles are going to remain the same as it was at that lower level. So you have to adjust. You have to be able to and willing to accept that role and be great at it. So, that was one big thing that I think made certain guys stick in the league, because believe me, I saw a lot of talented guys come through our training camps, our mini camps, and the guys that made it weren't always the most talented. They weren't always the most physically gifted, but they understood a role. And then, the other thing that was just so incredible about NBA players is just, the slim margin of error that there is when you're guarding some of these guys. You're coaching high school kids and, hey, you tell a guy, you got to go over this screen with this kid. He's a great shooter. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. Sometimes the kid will make the pay. But, as long as you play hard, we'll be okay. Well, at that NBA level, not only do you have to go over the screen, but you have to do it with great technique. You have to, be great at it, or else you're going to get scored on. And so, seeing that at that level, it was just, amazing to watch how good those guys were, how if you make a mistake, the ball's going in the bucket. And that just, that's one of the big things that improves you as a coach is, you're going to get tested, and, you really have to have that attention to detail at that level, because the guys will make you pay. And it really makes you think about, okay, what are we doing here? How can we improve it? And it, just gets down to these little nuances where you tweak them, and, it might only help you 1 or 2%, but, sometimes that's the difference. And so, yeah, that margin for error, offensively and defensively at that level, is just so small.
Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more.
It's really interesting that you mentioned about the role player piece of it, and just making sure that you understand your role and having 1 or 2 elite skills. We talked to Lyle Wolf last week. He's an assistant at Texas A&M, and he brought in something that we've talked about it a little bit before. We had Mike Procopio on, who was with the Mavs, and I'm sure you know who Mike is, but he talked a lot about how you have to dominate simple is his mantra, and that he said the same thing that you did, that basically in the NBA you have 20 guys or 30 guys, one guy per team maybe, that kind of gets to do what they want to do and gets as many shots as they want to get. And then everybody else has to be good at 1 or 2 things. They have to make sure that they're fulfilling whatever their role is. But what Lyle talked about, which I thought was interesting, and I think it kind of speaks to your experience, especially when you go down to the younger levels of the game, right? And you see kids working out with trainers, or they're working on their game. They're kind of working on everything. And most everything that they do is with the ball and playing one-on-one, and the dribble moves and the shooting and all those things that everybody likes to play. And they're trying to develop and become an all-around player, and rightfully so. But
as you move up in levels, as you said, the kid who's going from JV to varsity or the kid who's going from varsity to college, you're probably not going to be that guy who's going to have the ball in their hands orchestrating everything all the time. And what becomes important, and you said it at the NBA level, that you have to be really, really good at one or two things, and your team needs you to play that role, and you need to be able to execute that role perfectly or as close to perfectly as you possibly can. And if you can't accept that, then it becomes a lot more difficult for you to be able to stick in the league or to be able to find a role on your college team or your high school team or whatever it is. And yet I think so oftentimes the mentality, especially again, as you're younger, everybody's working on all aspects of their game to try and improve it. And you would think that it would make sense for that to continue. But yet if you go up the ladder and you think about NBA players, it doesn't make sense for every guy on the team to be working to try to emulate the skills that Steph Curry has, or try to play like LeBron, or try to play like Kawhi. And because you're going to be a lesser version of those guys no matter what you do. And so, yeah, to your point, you have to find your role. And I think that it's something that a lot of times players, especially, they don't think about that as they're transitioning from one level of the game to the next. And I think it's important for coaches at all levels to help players to understand that even if you're a role player, your role can be very, very important. And that communication piece, I would guess on the NBA level, is really important as well.
You know, kind of piggybacking on what you were saying there too, I think, you know, another big mistake that a lot of guys make at all levels is, you know, they hear what they can't do all the time. You know, you have this great college player, but, you know, he couldn't shoot the ball on the perimeter or whatever it might be. And so these guys would come into, you know, these workouts and they would try so hard to prove, hey, I can do this. And, you know, I heard veteran NBA coaches all the time take these young guys aside and say, buddy, you know, we didn't bring you here to watch you shoot threes. You know, we know that's not what you do.
Right.
Do what got you here. You know, be great, be you. And, you know, these guys say, well, you can't do this, can't do that. They want to prove so bad that they can do it. And they end up losing, you know, kind of losing their identity as a basketball coach and, as a basketball player. And, you know, be you, definitely.
That's hard though, right? I mean, as a player, you think about what you've done your whole career. Look, if you're good enough to be in the NBA at some point, and who knows when that point was, but at some point you were probably the guy. Now there are some exceptions to players who maybe if you're a big guy and, you know, you didn't have the ball in your hands all the time, but certainly most players, if you're good enough to be even entertaining an opportunity to play in the NBA, you were probably the guy at some point. And so to be able to tamp down your ego, to understand that, look, yeah, there are some things that I can't do, but here's what I'm really good at. I've got to double down on those. I can see where if you're not in the right frame of mind and it's not communicated to you in the right way, and you don't have the right team of people around you that are telling you the right things, that I can see where that can go south in a hurry, and maybe not be players not being as receptive to that as they should be if they want to stick around.
You know, that's where the coaching aspect of it is so important. You know, we have to, as coaches, find those roles for the players and, you know, show them, hey, here's where you fit in. Here's where you help us. And, you know, get them to buy into that role no matter what it is. And I think, you know, the teams and the players that have the success, you know, you have the majority of your guys, if not all of them, you know, buying into that. And, you know, it might not be the role they wanted. And that's fine. You know, it's great to have, you know, to want more of a role, you know, to have more responsibilities on your team. But, you know, as a coach, hey, here's where you're at now. And, you know, here's how you can get there. Here's how we can give you more of a role. But this is what we need you to do now. And, you know, I think if you don't do that as a coach, eventually somewhere along the way, you know, you're going to butt heads with that player. And it's going to cause more problems if you push that down the line. It's better to address it right away and, you know, get that buy-in early.
Yeah, I think that early communication and being proactive, I think you can talk about that in pretty much any situation in life, right? As a teacher, it's much better to have proactive communication and build a relationship with a parent before you have problems with the kid. Same thing when you're talking about coaching at the high school level. I'm sure that you've had plenty of conversations with parents where it's good if you have a positive relationship with the parent. And then if there is something that arises along the way with playing time or whatever, if you've already established a good line of communication, it makes those more difficult conversations along the road come a little bit easier. And same thing with a coach and player, I'm sure at the NBA level, if you're talking to that player and you're helping them to understand where they are right from the get-go, they're going to be more accepting, or you're going to know right away that they're not going to accept it. And then you can figure out what to do with that relationship. But you have to be honest. I think that brutal honesty is something that's a theme that has come through the podcast over and over and over again, talking to coaches that, look, what players want from you is they don't want you to sugarcoat it. They want you to tell them the truth. And you get in trouble when you don't tell the truth, because eventually the truth is going to play itself out. If the coach doesn't think you're good enough, well, guess what? You're probably not going to play. But if they keep stringing you along and say, yeah, you're doing great, you're doing this, but then you're still not getting in the game, players start not to trust their coaching staff. And that's when you, I think as a coach, get in trouble when you don't have that proactive communication. It's so important. When you are there in Orlando, was there one particular coach that had some experience that when you get down there on staff that kind of took you under their wing and that sort of looked out for you in those, in your early months there? And who did you develop the closest relationship with?
Closest relationship I had was with Coach Borrego. We were both had a background. We both lived in San Diego. Coach Borrego had coached and played at USD, so we knew a lot of the same people. We had a lot of familiar things to talk about, and he was just so good to me, taking me under his wing, and many flights sitting next to him, just breaking down game film of him, pointing out to me, why I'm on the court, and he was just so good with his time and treated me so well. So. He spent a lot of time with me, and he was so good to me. And another guy was LaRon Prophet. He was also, assistant on our staff, did a lot of player development. And, he had a different experience. He was a former NBA player, and, and played with – he was incredible. He had the opportunity to play with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And so hearing those stories and being able to talk to him and see it from a player perspective, because that's something as a coach, when you don't have that NBA background as a player, it's hard. It's hard to establish relationships with the players. It's hard to gain their respect. And so the more things you can soak up from a guy that's been there, that's played in big games, that's played with some of the greats, and was an elite player, you're better off as a coach. So, it's great to talk to him and just learn from him from more of a player's perspective of, what the guys are going through, because he's lived that, he's been through that as a player.
What's something that he shared with you that benefited you as a coach from a player perspective when you think about what you may have overlooked or what the staff may overlook that he was able to bring to the table? And obviously Coach Vaughn was a former player as well, but just what do you think that player perspective, what are some things that maybe they bring to the table that a coach who hasn't played maybe just might not be aware of, something that you remember him telling you that you were like, oh yeah, maybe that does make sense, and we hadn't thought of it that way?
A couple things. I think the first thing is, how many different ways each player is pulled, how many different directions, how many people have their hands on every player in the NBA. They have an agent there, they have family, a wife or a girlfriend. And, at the high school level, every player, they might have a family member or whatever, but they don't have agents. They don't have alumni of the college they went to. They don't have a fan, that's rooting for them necessarily. And so these guys are getting pulled a lot of different directions. And, as a coach, you have to be able to, to sift through that and be able to, make things make sense to the player and get them to buy in, to a team perspective. And so, not having not played at that level and, listening to him talk about, where the guys' heads might be after a certain road trip, or, just different things he had lived as a player. I remember one time we were playing in Toronto, and it was a 2:00 game. And, that was kind of a tradition. You play on the weekend, I believe it was a Sunday. There's always an early game in Toronto. And, he warned me. He's like, the guys better be ready to play. I hope people weren't out having, too fun of a night in Toronto on Saturday night. And boy, sure enough, he was right. He knew exactly what he was talking about from that perspective, because we did not play well that next day. But, he just gave so much good insight on, what the players emotionally are going through, what their bodies are going through. As a coach, man, I would be tired sometime being on the floor working out with the guys, but you have no idea the miles on their legs, the demand that their bodies have, with, playing heavy minutes for some guys, working out, as much as they do. As a coach, sometimes we kind of lose track of, this guy might need a break, or we might need to cut this guy's workout down. And, having been there, he was able to give great perspective on that.
I wish my college coach would have thought about that.
Yeah, but that's another way the game has evolved too. Is I think as coaches now we realize that man, if you don't have it by mid-season or late season, there's no point in having a 3-hour practice. We ain't getting it. So you're better off being fresh at that point than having that 3-hour practice.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's funny because I think about that to some degree as a player, but when I was early in my career, when I was first teaching and I was an assistant varsity coach, and at the time our staff was all young and most of us were single, and we'd have these practices, and this is with high school kids, and there'd be times, we'd start practice at 2:30 and we'd get done at like 6:00. And you think, we were practicing for 3.5 hours with high school kids. Like what could we have possibly have been getting out of them in that last half hour of a 3.5 hour practice? It's just, it's crazy when you think back on sort of the way that we used to do things, and you think about the NBA and just how advanced they've become in the league with the number of people that are monitoring, again, recovery and just where they're at, and how important it's become for players to be able to have rest and the whole load management piece and all that stuff. But when you were there, how difficult is it during the season to not be able to practice in between games? Obviously you're doing a lot of film work, but just what's it like to play all those games and not practice?
That was something that was, just totally new to me because, at the high school level, even at the college level, you're playing once, twice a week. And, you're able to get 1 or 2 good practices in each week. At the NBA level, you're lucky if you get 1 light practice and a couple walkthroughs in. So a lot of your teaching is done differently. It's done, with video. It's done with, just some individual work on the court, especially with those younger players. And, it's really difficult for your young guys that are out of the rotation, especially, mid-late season and not getting those minutes. But, those are guys that still need to develop. So, you have to recreate game situations. They still have to be learning. They still have to be getting those game-like reps in order to develop. So, in the next few years, they're in that rotation, they're working their way up. So, you have to learn, and you have to learn how to teach, how to keep that progression going, even though, the practice time is not going to be there. Video is really your best tool for that.
What's your favorite practice moment from your time with the Magic?
Tough one. I know one memory that, I'll have with me for the rest of my life was we were in, I believe it was Portland, and, tough road trip, not winning much. And so, we go into Portland. It's a shoot around that morning. And, we kind of had a routine. We go in, watch some clips, of what we're going to see that night with Portland. And we get out on the floor, shoot the ball a little bit, go through some things. So that's totally what I was expecting. The video guys get the screen ready there in the locker room. Coach Vaughn's there ready to go over, the clips. And all of a sudden I see highlights of me as a little guy running around out there. And little did I know, somebody went behind my back and found some old video footage of me as a young guy playing, and they put it up there. And so it's just a way to kind of break up the monotony and get guys to loosen up a little bit. And we did that with several guys along the way. But yeah, I'll never forget that. And that's a fun memory that'll stick with me.
Was there a particular player during your era there that you felt like you really connected with, and somebody that you're still in touch with today?
E'Twaun Moore was one of my favorite guys I've ever coached, and I spent so much time with him and just got to see him develop, from a guy that was, out of the rotation. We picked him up as kind of a free agent from Boston, and he was just looking for an opportunity. And, E'Twaun just worked his butt off, just spent countless hours in the gym. He, like we talked about earlier, he was a guy that wasn't the most talented, talented guy, no doubt, but a lot of guys that went in and out of NBA gyms that were more physically gifted than E'Twaun. But he knew a role, he accepted a role, and he was great in it. And so, really had a great connection with him. We spent a lot of time in the gym together. He was receptive to the things we taught and worked on and bought into that role. And, he had a long NBA career, made a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a really good example, as you said, of a guy that you just figure it out. And if you can figure it out and you're a guy who's a team first guy and you can play your role and you can be someone who's a positive member of the team, like guys, staffs don't want guys who are headaches who are going to be guys 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You want guys who are good team guys who are going to work and put in the time. And I think there's a good lesson there for players at all levels of the game, right? If you want to be a part of it, you got to put in the work. You got to be a positive team player. And if you can do those things, then you got a chance to stick around and be a part of something special, which obviously he was able to do at various stops along his career. As you look back on your time with the Magic and you think about that experience with NBA basketball, what's your fondest recollection as a coach when you think about what you learned from that experience that's made you a better coach in your next few stops, which we're going to talk about on the college level and then eventually back to high school?
I think it's the biggest thing is just, the relationships and how you form those bonds with your players. Because again, there's a million different ways to win basketball games. But, I know one thing, if you don't have the buy-in, if you don't have strong relationships with your players, I don't care what you do, you're not winning consistently. So, learning from Coach Vaughn, he was just so great at establishing those relationships, being truthful with guys, like we talked about earlier, defining roles clearly for people. Those were all great things to learn at that level. And, you just learn it, I think, quicker at that level because, again, the margin for error and how competitive that level is, it's going to speed that process up. You're just able to learn at a really high level.
When you leave the Magic and you go to the college level and you go to Cameron, talk a little bit about that transition and why you made that move to go to college basketball. Obviously, now you've been at the high school level, you've been at the pro level. Now you're going to go and coach at the college levels. Just talk a little bit about that transition from Orlando to Cameron.
At that point, I kind of started to see, where my strengths were as a coach. And, I knew at that point, I want to be a head coach at the college level or at the pro level. But, there's only a handful of those jobs at the pro level. And they're hard to get. And so, I knew my path forward was going to be as a head coach and probably at the college level. And the other big part of it was, I met my future wife. Wasn't my wife yet while I was in Orlando, but that the family aspect of it, played a huge role where, it's hard to start a family and start your NBA career or invest the time that it's going to take to be a head coach someday. I think it's a lot easier if you've established a family, maybe your kids are a little older. It's tough, when you don't have that yet. And, you're going to have to put those hours in to get to that level. Not impossible, but, it's really hard. And so, I knew my path forward was going to be as a college coach. And, I think kind of like we talked about earlier with players accepting their roles, I think that's something that's important as coaches too to understand is, being a head coach and being an assistant coach they're totally different. And, as a coach, we all have different strengths. We all have different weaknesses. And, there's guys that are just built to be assistant coaches. They're great at it. And, they know where they fit in. They know that, it maybe is not as a head coach. And then there's other guys that, they're just born to be head coaches. They're born to be leaders. And, it's so understanding, where your strengths lie as a coach. And, I just kind of felt that, that's where my future lied. That's what my strengths were, just from a teaching aspect. I love teaching the game, and I love teaching my style. It's hard to teach someone else's style or someone else's philosophy with conviction. And, it was easy for me to teach my style with conviction. It's hard to do that, when you're learning, especially at a new level, at the NBA level. So, I knew I wanted to be a head coach, and I knew my path forward just made more sense at the college level.
When you make that transition from the pro game back to the college game, what was it like in terms of you're looking at obviously a different level of player? Was that an easy adjustment, a hard adjustment, something that it didn't take very long for you to get adapted back? Just what was it like to go from coaching obviously the best players in the world to coaching college players who were still obviously very skilled, but not at the level of NBA? Just talk a little bit about what that was like.
It was one of the toughest transitions I had made, believe it or not. It was just as difficult as the jump from high school to the NBA because, it's you want to coach, you have all these ideas flowing through your head and, it's really easy to overcomplicate things. And, that's exactly what happened. And, I found over the years, the more we're able to simplify things, just the better we get, the better our players are, the more freely they play, the more fun we have, and the wins just follow. And, that was something I had to learn was, you have to dial it back. And, you have to understand that it's not what I as the coach can understand. It's not about me looking smart and, look at this complicated, system we're running here on both ends of the floor. It's about what your players can comprehend. And, obviously these college players, they don't have the experience that these NBA guys have. They haven't played the games. They haven't, had the same experiences. And so, you can look pretty foolish as a coach when you go out there and try to, put all these different things in and you just overcomplicate it. So, dialing it back each and every year from everything, from what we do on the floor, how we run our practices to even just the scouting reports, that was something at the NBA level, these scouting reports were, very detailed and, and they should be, those guys, it's their job. It's our job as coaches to have them prepared. And, it's 100% basketball all the time. But, at the college level, guys are going to class, and, it's basketball 10% of the time. And so, you really have to scale that back as well, where we're not able to put a half a page on, the eighth guy, coming off their bench. That's not going to help us win. We're going to have to simplify this and make it easy to understand, but still, be organized.
In your time as an assistant coach, what did you learn about putting together the right staff so that when you got the opportunity to become the head coach at Lincoln Trail after a season at Cameron, what did you learn about assistant coaches and what you were looking for in an assistant coach when you put together your own staff?
The biggest thing you have to take into consideration is you have to know, where your weaknesses and where your strengths are as a coach. Because, if you hire a clone of yourself, maybe my strength is, I'm a great teacher on the floor. I can really, get a lot out of a practice. And, I go out and hire staff that does the same thing. We're going to struggle in a lot of areas. So, having the maturity to understand, I need help here. I am not a great recruiter, or, I'm not a great fundraiser, or whatever it might be. Your staff has to be able to fill those voids and plug in where, you're not strong. Because, I have yet to meet the person that, has it all under control. There's a lot of good coaches out there that do a lot of things really well, but, nobody is, I would say, the complete package. So I think that was a big thing, is just, number one, knowing where your weaknesses are, but then number two, not micromanaging those guys. You brought them in to do a job, let them do their job, and again, that's something Coach Vaughn allowed me to do as a young coach. Is, he gave me a lot of responsibilities, from, game scouting, running drills and practices, running shoot-arounds, putting films together, clips together. He gave me those opportunities to have the chance to learn. And, that was something I knew as a head coach. When I hired my staff, I wanted to give those guys those opportunities so they could grow as a coach and, not micromanage, their every move.
When you put together that staff, what was your philosophy on dividing roles and responsibilities amongst the staff? Did you have a discussion with them about, hey, what do you like to do? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Did you have offensive, defensive coordinator? Just what was your process for putting together the roles and responsibilities for your staff?
Another thing that, the NBA was just, a great learning tool for me was how to do that. So, yeah, we divided up a lot of different things. We divided up our schedule where I would give each assistant coach, and usually our staff would be 2 assistants and then 1 student assistant. But we would divide that schedule up and just allow those guys to focus on a small group of teams, 4 or 5, 6 teams, where they could kind of track them throughout the year and have more of a, their thumb on the pulse of that team, whereas having every coach focus on the whole schedule. So, I like that idea of, giving a guy 6 teams. Hey, when we play Vincennes, this is your scout. I'm going to lean on you for everything. And, I thought that worked really well. It was something I enjoyed as an NBA coach, was having those teams and just following them and, having a real good idea of what they were doing. And, not having to focus broadly on that. The other thing was the player development part of it. So we would break down our roster and give each assistant, 3 or 4 guys, and we would rotate it as well. But, 3 or 4 guys just to get in the gym with individually, 4 or 5 times a week and just do skill work with. And, I thought that was good just, for our assistants to develop relationships with those players, to be in the gym with them, one-on-one or, one-on-2. And, be able to do that skill development. And so, that was another thing, picked up at the NBA level. And then, just all the other things that go into running a program, the recruiting part of it. I had one assistant coach, Spencer Cook, who was just phenomenal with recruiting. That was probably one of the biggest, reasons why we were able to have some success at Lincoln Trail. Was just, our talent was upgraded every year. And, he just was so good at, number one, identifying the talent and knowing that, hey, he's going to fit our system. He's going to fit our style of play. So, he kind of took the lead on recruiting. I trusted him to kind of narrow our list down. And, he was just so good at that. We all had a hand in it, but, he took the lead in that. And then just all the other aspects of the program, the fundraising, the making sure guys are getting to class on time, the academic aspect of it. We broke that all down and just empowered each coach to take the lead on those different areas and, with the head coach overseeing it all.
What was the most fun part of being a head coach at the college level?
Enjoyable parts of it. I think one thing that's unique about college that's, you just don't get it anywhere else is you're able to recruit to, what you want. You don't get that in high school. You have a bunch of community kids and, you got what you got. You might have 10 guys that are 6 foot tall. You don't get to determine that when you're a high school coach. Same thing kind of in the NBA, especially as an assistant. You lean on your general manager, your assistant GM to make those personnel moves. We don't pick who's out there. Maybe some of the veteran coaches that have been around a long time, they do, but we didn't. And so, you're coaching the group of guys that are put in front of you. But at the college level, we're able to, hey, here's how we want to play. This is the style. This is how I think we're going to be able to win in our league. And you're able to go out and recruit that. And, I really enjoyed, developing an identity as a program and, kind of seeing that flourish on the floor and recruiting to, what you thought would be able to win.
What was the most enjoyable part of coaching at the junior college level? And what makes the junior college experience unique for both coaches and players?
Very unique level because, you're getting these talented guys in there. But, that hopefully is no one's final destination. Everybody is trying to move on and, get to that Division I level. And so, that can be difficult to manage that at sometimes, when you have a roster of, 10, 12 guys who all have aspirations of, being a scholarship player at the 4-year level, that's difficult. But again, being able to be honest with those guys and say, hey, here's where I see you. And, here's what we're going to be able to do for you. But the most enjoyable part is, recruiting that young man that needs the help, that isn't a finished product, that has maybe had some struggles on the court as a player or, academically. And getting that young man to a place, his sophomore year where, he's improved as a player. He's matured as a student athlete and, he's ready now where he wasn't ready coming out of high school. And, the list of guys that, we were able to move on is just, it's the best feeling in the world as a coach to have that kid, earn that scholarship and be able to change his life, his family's life. There's no better feeling as a coach to watch that happen. And, it's great too, then to go watch that player go on to have success and kind of represent, your junior college. It's a great feeling.
Talk a little bit about the difference between your process as a coach at the high school level and at the college level when it comes to practice planning and sort of the way you design your practices to maximize both what your players are going to get out of it individually and what you want to get out of it from a team standpoint. One of the biggest differences is just the manpower, at the high school level, especially last year, there'd be a lot of practices where it was just me in the gym, with the team. And so when you have that situation, it really changes, what you're able to do in a practice and, you got to be prepared for that. But, at the college level, when you have 2-3 guys that, you trust and that are good, you're able to do so many breakdowns and a lot of just diving into a lot of the little details in practice that, at the high school level, when you don't have the staff, you might not be able to get into, all that. And so, that was big, having a great staff at the college level that, you can trust and be able to, have a breakdown on both sides or 3 or 4 baskets. But then, just the skill level, like I said before, every level you move up, your margin for error is different. And, you teach the game different. You have to have attention to little details, in order to be successful at the college level. So, it's very enjoyable being able to take a young man from a high school program and show them, okay, you did that in high school, but, here's how we're going to do it at this level now. This is going to help you be a better player. And, I really enjoyed that about the college game. And, it's something different. Your players in a different place skill-wise, athletically. And, it's almost a different sport sometimes. Yeah, I could see that. What about the relationships that you build with players? Obviously, no matter what the level is, whether you're talking about your experience at the NBA or you're talking about college or you're talking about high school, you're trying to build those relationships with your players. How is it different in your college experience versus your high school experience in terms of how you go about spending time with the players, investing in them, and then as a result, building that relationship? Because obviously you have different situations where they're in college and they're living on campus and you've got access to them in those ways. But then at the high school level, they're living at home, and there's just obviously differences. So talk a little bit about building relationships with players at both the college and high school level.
Started to bring it up right there where, in high school, the kids go home to mom and dad every night. And, when those kids step foot on campus, it's totally different. When you go out and recruit a young man, you're bringing them onto campus, and that parent's, trusting you with their child. And, there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with that where, mom and dad aren't cooking them dinner every night now. Mom and dad aren't checking and waking them up in the morning. It's time to grow up now when you're on a college campus. And so, it's a lot different when your players are not going home now. You're responsible for those guys. And, one thing I was a big believer in at the college level was, we told this to every parent when we recruited their son was, we're not in the business of babysitting. We believe 100% that, it's not for everybody. And, there's some kids that are going to come in and they're going to fail the first time, but the best way I know how to learn is, by sometimes you have to fail. So, you don't wake up for your 8 a.m. class. I'm not coming over there and waking you up. You're going to learn the hard way. And, not having that, your mom and dad to set that alarm clock for you, cook you breakfast, roll you out of bed. That's a tough transition for a lot of kids. And, being the coach at that level, it's up to you to teach these guys, how to be college athletes, because they have no idea, it's their first experience with it. And, how to manage their time, how to just survive, on their own. It's difficult. And so you can never underestimate how little guys know sometimes. It's amazing. Just some things that you're like, wow, okay, I guess I have to teach that, So, yeah, it's a big difference when, they're out on their own the first time. And, you never, even when you're home with your family at night, in the back of your mind, you're still, hoping the guys are getting it done, doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're in those dorm rooms.
Yeah, I can imagine that can be, I don't want to say scary, but I'm sure that's something that as a college coach that you're constantly trying to remind and then think about just making sure that those guys make decisions. We've all been 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, and our decision-making processes at that age aren't always as good as maybe they should be. And when you think about being a college coach and the responsibility that you have to make sure that your athletes are doing the right thing for themselves, most importantly, and then also for your program, really, really important. Talk a little about the transition then back to Yuma Catholic to leave the college level, come back to high school. What was the thought process there? And kind of just give us an update on sort of where you are career-wise with your current job, and kind of maybe where you think you might see this going in the future.
When things end at the college level, most of the time you're either moving up or moving laterally or you're getting fired. And, that wasn't really my case. We had a great 3-year run where, every year our program was really improving. And, but, for me, it was just a family decision where, we had 2 young kids, and we just nowhere near family. And, that was tough to kind of be on your own in the Midwest with, family on each coast. So, that played a big factor into it, and just feel like, it was time for a change, a new challenge. It was time to move on. And, it turned out to be a great decision from both aspects. I really enjoy my time so far here at Yuma Catholic. It's a great community, great school. And, just having the opportunity now to be around family has just been, such a great transition for me and my kids and my wife.
To go along with that, one of the things that we've talked with lots of different coaches about is how you balance your coaching with your family. And obviously you have young kids, and it's always a challenge to build the kind of program that you want to build and put in the kind of time that we all know you need to put in today in order to be able to have success. So how have you thought about, how do you think about the balance between building that successful basketball program and being dedicated to your players and your team, and also being dedicated to your home team, your family? How do you divide that up, and how do you think about that?
The family has to come first, and I think for me, it's hard to be a great coach if, I'm not a good dad at home. So, knowing that, that's taken care of, and, my young girls are getting what they need, that makes me a better coach. So, you always got to put that first. And, looking back at it, I think as a young coach, you have to be strategic, about, what do I want as a coach? What do I want to get out of this? And then, what do I want from a family aspect? And, I think the more you can plan that out and, put those years where, man, you have to grind, you got to put a lot of time in away from home. If you can get that and get to a position where, now maybe you don't have to put, the 60, 70, 80-hour weeks in, and then you can start your family. I think the more you can plan that out and be strategic about it, the better. I wasn't smart enough to do that. My path was kind of weird, bouncing all over the place. But, it worked out for me. But, if I could look back and talk to young self, I would, I think the more you can plan that out, the more successful you're going to be, not only as a coach, but as a father as well.
When you think about the three places that you've been as a high school coach, and you look at the success that you've been able to have at each of those places, can you put your finger on one or maybe two things that you feel have enabled the programs at the high school level that you've been a part of to be successful?
I think the biggest thing is just the kids. I've been fortunate to coach great kids with great families. And, the coaching has changed, my style, my, what we teach on the floor, that's changed over the years. But, the kids, as long as you have great kids that buy into what you're teaching, you can be successful. And I think that's been the one consistent thing now at all three stops that we've had, is just the kids buy in. They're fun to coach. There's nothing better than the feeling of walking into your gym and wanting to coach the group of kids, you're with. You don't get the eye rolls all the time, and, the bumping heads and fighting kids to buy in. It happens. And, that makes coaching so enjoyable. And, I think I've been very fortunate now to have that at all three stops at the high school level and in college. We had great kids at the college level too at Lincoln Trail. But yeah, it just makes the coaching so enjoyable when you have that. And we're really fortunate again this year to have a great group of kids, super young team, but a great group of kids that are hungry and, they want to learn. So it makes it fun.
How do you engage the families that are a part of your program? Do you have anything special that you do to get parents bought in and get them on the same page? Obviously, we talked a little bit earlier about that proactive communication, but tell us a little bit about what you do to make sure that you have parents on board and buying into you and your basketball program.
Things, and I think this goes to the players buying in as well, as, you have to be prepared. You have to, just like any teacher, if you walk into the classroom and you're scrambling, you're unprepared, you're not confident in what you're teaching, Parents are going to know that. Your players are definitely going to know that. And getting that buy-in is going to be next to impossible. So, just having a plan in place, being confident with what that plan is, and just being organized. When parents see that, they're going to be, a lot more, they're going to place a lot more trust in you. They're going to believe in what you're doing with your program and with their son. So being organized, having a vision for where you want to take the program and being honest and upfront, like we talked about before with, where the players fit into that, I think is big. Like we talked about before, if you, kind of sugarcoat it and lead a kid on, it might not happen right away, but eventually that's going to backfire. And I think the more honest you can be about, where kids fit into your program, you're going to be better off in the long run. And I think the players and the parents, the families they're going to respect that. So, presenting a vision for what you want that program to be, promoting it, having pride in what that vision is, hey, this is our system. This is our program. It's unique. It's special. I think players buy into that and the parents do as well. When they see their son having a great experience, it's hard. Any parent's going to love that. And so, that's the main thing. When a high school kid graduates, especially, if they're a part of a JV team, they're not going to remember what their record was on that JV team, when they're 27, 30 years old. They might remember some varsity games or whatever, but what they're really going to remember is this experience they had, the camaraderie, the feeling you get of being part of that program. And so that's what we try to create at every stop is just, a feeling of, building a program and being part of something that's special.
What does that look like in your mind when you talk about building an ideal experience? Because I think as a player, as a coach, as a parent, you sort of have an idea of what that feels like, what that looks like. But I'm always curious to hear, what do you think makes for a great high school basketball experience? Like if you talk to one of your players 5 years from now or 10 years from now, how would you hope that conversation would go? What do you think they'd share about your program that makes it special and makes that unique experience that you're talking about?
It's just the little traditions you develop. I think it's the different things you instill in your players. It can be as simple as, you're walking on campus and you see a candy wrapper on the ground, you pick it up. It's how you treat the janitors. It's how you treat maybe the non-athletes that are in your English class. It's doing things and kind of branding it. Hey, this is the YC or the Yuma Catholic way we do things. And it's different than other schools. We do things different here. And, it's what we'll go the extra mile, and it's what sets us apart. It's what makes our program unique. And it can even be your on-court things, Hey, here's how we rebound the basketball. Here's how we run hard in transition. Here's how we defend. And, when you package that and say, we're going to demand more of you than, this other school, kids buy into that. And I think you have to have that to have a special program.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I think if you can do that, then you're really on your way to having something special. We're coming up close to an hour and a half here, Luke. So I want to wrap up with one final two-part question. First part, when you look ahead over the next year or two, what's the biggest challenge that you see in front of you? And then number two, when you think about what you get to do each and every day, coaching basketball and being with your family, what brings you the most joy? So your biggest challenge and your biggest joy.
Biggest challenge right now, we're going to have a talented team coming back. We're coming off a very successful season, region champs, and the bar has been raised this year as far as Yuma Catholic basketball goes. So, living up to those expectations this year is going to be a huge challenge, and still doing it with a relatively young team that maybe hasn't had some of the pressure situations and some of the big games that they're going to need. We're going to have to learn on the fly. And, we have a group this year that's talented enough to possibly win a state championship, but, we're going to have to learn quickly. So that's going to be a huge challenge for us this year with a heavy sophomore junior group. But, I really like our team this year, and it's going to be a fun year. The thing that gives me the most joy, the great mix right now of the family and work life, being a college coach, man, you miss out on a lot of things. You're away recruiting, and, you're just burning both ends of the candle a lot of times. It's difficult to have that balance. And, like we talked about earlier, having that work family balance just makes you a better coach. It re-energizes you. So, that's something that's been very rewarding, and, just being part of a special community has been very fun.
That's well said. And I think we've learned a lot from all of your different experiences at all these different levels of the game. And I think your journey, not only have you been able to grow and then experience these different levels and share that with players, and now getting a chance to share this with our audience. Again, we're very, very appreciative. Before we get out, can you share how people can reach out to you, how they can find out more about you, what you're doing in your program, whether you want to share email, social media, whatever you feel comfortable with? And then after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
I kind of started doing a few videos on YouTube. It's called Stuck on Hoops. I just have a few things on there, just some simple breakdowns of some basketball things on there, and hope to expand on that in the future. And if anybody ever has any questions, man, I love other coaches, fellow coaches reaching out. And, people were so good to me as a young coach. And, something I'm really looking forward to as I get a little older and hopefully a little wiser is, being able to help other young coaches out in the business. So Coach Luke Stuckey at gmail.com. Shoot me an email anytime, and love to connect with other coaches.
Fantastic. Luke, cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule tonight to jump on with us. Really appreciate your time. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.